What is up, everyone? Aeneas here. Welcome back to the top 5 new brews for MTG1 or for Phyrexia All Will Be One. Today we're talking about the last deck in the top 5 brews. This is called Blue White X. So this is a concept deck. And what is the key card of this deck, the thing that makes this work? Well, it is this one here, Mind Splice Apparatus. Mind Splice Apparatus. This is a card CGB was really high on, and I was a little bit down on it at first until we found that the land was spoiled, the Monumental Facade, which lets you put oil counters on things. I think with that card, then this card definitely has a chance in Standard, and with the right build of the deck, could really shine and be strong. So we're trying it out here, and I think it was solid enough that I put it at the #1 slot as one of the new brews for the set, and hopefully we'll bring control back into the meta, but who knows, you know, control hasn't been good for a while. It's always been at least tier 2. Oh, we'll see how it goes. So I'm excited to share with you how the deck works and how everything looks. But right before we get into this, I have a lot of other decks that I want to share, some honorable mentions and a bunch of Demir brews and things like that that I really enjoyed making, that I haven't quite fleshed all the way out, but I think they're still cool to share. So I'll probably be making another video after this one sharing some of those. And as I mentioned before, if you want to see some historic updates to some decks, let me know and I'll try to brew some of those as well. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into this deck and the deck tech. So starting off in the 2 mana slot, we have Bring the Ending. This is a new counterspell that has just been really cool. Seems to fit very well with the poison and toxic synergies going on in the set. Basically, it's a make disappear, 2 mana counter target spell unless they pay 2. But if you have 3 poison counters on the opponent, then it becomes a full counterspell instead. So yeah, just a pretty flexible card. It's good early game and potentially could be good late game as well. We also have Experimental Augury. So this is a kind of like Anticipate, a draw-ish spell filter. I don't know how you call it. You like look at the top few cards of your deck, you grab one of them, the rest go to the bottom of the library. But this also has a Proliferate tied to it, which is going to be very helpful for what we want to do in the deck. So that's why we're including this one. And for our early removal of the deck, we're going with kind of pseudo removal. Serum Snare is a bounce spell for non-land permanents. Can be your stuff as well. But whenever you bounce something that's 3 CMC or less, you also proliferate. And the other one we're going with is Soul Partition, which makes them have to recast their spell, and it costs 2 more. The reason we're going with these is we mostly want to just delay the opponent's creatures. We don't need to necessarily get rid of them right now on turn 2. So we needed some cards that would delay them, slow them down, and let us get to our semi-late game of the deck. Because once we get, I would say, around 5 mana, that's when we really start to shine and we can take over the game. Okay, so besides those removals, the other 2-drop we got is Tablet of Completion. This is a 2 mana rock that upside is late game it draws you cards. Even kind of mid game it can draw you cards. The downside is it's a little bit hard to turn on the mana rock part of it. So you play it on turn 2, you tap it, you put an oil counter on it, and then you can't tap it for mana until it has 2 oil counters on it. So how do you get the oil counters on it? You can, as I said, tap it. So either tap it for 2 turns to turn it on, or if we have the Monumental Facade, then you can put a counter on it that way as well. So why include this card? Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, I think jumping, even though this one can't really jump from 2 mana to 4 mana because it doesn't turn on right away, it can jump you like as long as you play it on turn 2, it will always jump you from 4 mana to 5 mana. And I think that's actually one of the really key points in the matchups when you play aggro, because a lot of times, especially against the soldiers deck, they'll play like a Thalia against you on turn. It could be as early as turn 2, but sometimes they'll even save it for right when you're about to sweep them on turn 4. They'll drop the Thalia so that you kind of get, messed up and you can't cast your sweeper spell. So this one lets you jump from 4 mana to 5 mana, meaning that even if they play Thalia, you can still cast Depopulate because you have that extra mana. So that's pretty crucial. The other thing is, if you're not being attacked that much, or the opponent only has one creature, then jumping to 5 mana can also let you play your Teferi, which is very nice. So you can get that ahead of curve just a little bit. And maybe the opponent doesn't have good answers for that. They don't have enough creatures on board to put pressure on it. And so you can kind of get ahead of the game that way. And as I mentioned, it can draw you cards late game, which also means, Teferi wants you to draw cards. It gets bigger, more counters, so that's just an upside right there. I want to make a little side note here that there were a few other options for Tablet of Completion that I was considering, and I will definitely have to try out how well this works on ladder and maybe considering swapping. So notable mentions are the Myr Convert. It's a 2 mana. This is a real 2 mana rock because, or mana dork, I guess. It ramps you from 2 to 4 directly, which could be really valuable in the game and might be the better choice. However, it is a creature. It does cost you life to get the mana. That's something. It's a creature, so it means it's going to die to our sweepers as well. So that is a downside. The other choice is Sten, which can give you discounts to whatever type of card you pick. So that also could work to discount something, but you have to choose one to populate sorcery or artifact, which makes it kind of a hard decision. I guess you'd have to see, am I against like an aggro deck and I need to populate right away to make that decision? Yeah, but again, it's a creature. It dies to your sweepers. So for me, that was just too much to make it where I wanted to try the Tablet of Completion over the creatures. And as I mentioned, that 5 mana spot is actually pretty crucial in many ways from the 2 I mentioned and even some of the X spells that we're going to be playing. Okay, so yeah, that's our 2 mana slots. Once we get past that, we can either cast some of our X spells potentially. For example, if you're against aggro, you might be able to steal some of the early soldiers, or you might steal some of the early red drops with your Blue Sun's Twilight, the new sorcery spell that steals something with CMC X or less. Or yeah, a few other things. But the main thing you want to try to get is your Mind Splice apparatus, which is very big because that's going to make all your spells cheaper and better and easier to cast. And the namesake of the deck is Blue-White X because we have 3 different X value spells: Blue Sun's Twilight, White Sun's Twilight, and Silver Scrutiny, all of which you want to cast for X being about 5 or more, pretty much in general. And the Blue Sun's Twilight and White Sun's Twilights get a big benefit if you do it for 5 or more. So that's the other reason. All right, so yeah, we get the Mind Splice down, probably turn 4, and then turn 5, we might do something else, but get it down turn 4. We cast it on the end of the opponent's end step. Now everything is going to cost 1 less at least, and if you happen to have Monumental Facade on the board, then you can make everything cost 2 less, meaning your Depopulate's going to be 2 mana. All your spells are going to cost 1 for the most part, and your X spells kind of you can kind of think of it that you removed like the original casting cost, so now it's just an X, just costs X. So turn 5, after you untapped and maybe you use the Monument Facade, you'll have to play see how it works out, but you want to cast it for X equals 5, get your stealing of the opponent's creature, make a copy of their creature. Now you've got like this massive board swing and they have to remove all the stuff, You stole their stuff, so they're one down one. It's always at least a 2-for-1, and when you cast it for X equals 5, then it's a 3-for-1. So just very sweet, very powerful card there. And we also have the White Sun's Twilight, which is another win con, where you cast this for 5 or 6 or 7, and you gain a bunch of life. You create a bunch of 1/1s which have toxic, which can turn on your Bring to the End. Which can also win you the game because you have a big huge board of toxic creatures, and you probably just swept the opponent previously. Well, and actually the other thing, if you cast this for at least X equals 5, you actually destroy all the opponent's creatures, so you get your 7 1/1s with toxic and the opponent has nothing. So that's a very huge swing there as well. And then the last one, Silver Scrutiny. You sometimes late game, you're running out of steam, you need to refill. Well, you want to cast this for 5, 6, or 7 typically, so you can get a whole new hand of cards. And what better easy way to do that than if you have a Mind Splice apparatus on the board, with oil counters, making all your stuff cheaper. And if you can refill your hand and you have like 1 or 2 of these Mind Splices on the field at that point, then probably anything you draw is going to be cheap, like 1 or 2 mana, and you can just keep chaining off and win the game. All right, I think I covered just about everything. I guess the last thing, play pattern of the deck is probably something like this, at least in my planning. Turn 2, you either are countering something from the opponent, or you're getting rid of their creature, making them have to cast it again. Turn 4 or 5 with the Tablet of Completion, possibly. You are casting your Depopulate, killing off their creatures, and then maybe they have a few cards left, they start to rebuild their board, and you get down your Mind Splice apparatus. Then once you have enough mana, you cast your White Sun's Twilight, you just blow up their creatures again, and you have a bunch of 1/1 mites that are going to win you the game if the opponent can't deal with them. And most likely, unless they're playing control as well, they can't deal with your mites. So you should be in the clear from there to win the game. All right, and there's other win cons, Teferi, etc., like we talked about. The last thing to bring up is because we have more blue-white lands in the set, I felt like we could add the colorless lands I mentioned, the Monumental Facade, and I went ahead and added 1 Mirrex as well. This is maybe something we could cut if it turns out to be too detrimental, but I think it just makes sense to have kind of a mana sink in your lands if you need it. So being able to crank out these 1/1 mites with toxic to get you closer to your win con, to getting the 10 poison, or to turning on your counter spell, both of those seem pretty good. So yeah, something to try out, new card tax kind of thing. We'll see if you're getting too many colorless lands and it's hurting you too much and needs to be cut. All right, well, that's about it for the concept of the deck. I'm pretty excited for it because control hasn't been super great in the format recently. However, I think with the mana rock here, the discount on all your big spells, there's a good chance that this can work, at least I think, against the aggro decks, and probably pretty decent against even things like Esper Legends. We'll have to see about other decks in the format like Mono Black, but I think most of the creature based decks, which is most of them, you're going to be in a pretty good spot here. And yeah, stealing all their creatures, getting some massive board wipes that turn the game in your favor, and that kind of stuff. So let me know what you think in the comments. What were you expecting for the #1 deck? How does it look to you? Do you think Mind Splice apparatus is viable? Yeah, let me know all the deets in the comments, and let me know if you want to see some of those other decks, the other honorable mention, Dimir stuff, and even the historic brews that I'm working on in the next few videos. But until next time, hope you can get out there, have some fun. Last few days until the new set, only about 2 more days, so have some fun, and until next time, see you.